Welcome to the Badass American Heroes podcast. Coming at you now. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Badass American Heroes podcast. I am, as always, your host, Brandon. This is the Badass American Heroes podcast, coming back at you with a very, very awesome two-part interview this week. So my guest this week, man, I can't wait to get into it. You want to talk about a guy who's just motivating, successful, entrepreneurial, and just a really stand-up great guy who cares about other veterans, cares about other people, and wants to do the right thing, in his community and with his life. I can't wait to tell you guys about who I've got on the podcast today. Before we jump into the interview, we have a little bit of housekeeping stuff to take care of real quick. So, if you don't know, this is the Badass American Heroes podcast. The Badass American Heroes podcast is a bi-weekly podcast. Twice a month, we come at you with a story that will blow your socks off. We focus on, America's greatest stories of courage, sacrifice, service, bravery, honor, integrity, courage. And we bring you those stories brought to you by the people who've lived them. And those are the veterans and service members of the United States military. People that have come from all different walks of life and sign on the dotted line to serve in the military. And we get to dive deep into their lives and their stories about what drives them and motivates them and the struggles that they've dealt with. So, guys, it's a special thing for me to get to sit down with these people and talk to them about their lives. And I really count myself as lucky to get to do it as often as I get to do it. So, thank you guys for checking it out and giving me the ability to do this. I'm so appreciative of the people that come on the podcast and that get to share their stories with the world. So it really does mean a lot. It's really important what we're doing here at the Badass American Heroes podcast, and I couldn't do it without all of you people out there that are listening to this right now. So thank you for being back again and checking out another episode. The next thing is the Swapcasts. Once a month, Blake from Noise Pollution Podcast and myself, we come together, we put our heads together, and we give you guys what you want. We give you a Swapcast where we talk about, politics, current events, sex robots, drugs, all kinds of crazy stuff. The stuff that doesn't get talked about on here, we talk about it on our monthly Swapcast. So make sure you check those out. They're really fun. They're really entertaining. And there's going to be some really big announcements coming out about the Swapcasts with Blake from the Noise Pollution Podcast. So make sure you stay tuned to hear about that. And check Blake out. Check out his podcast on Instagram, on Facebook, and on all the same places where you can download this podcast. It's called the Noise Pollution Podcast. You can find him on Instagram at Noise Pollution Podcast and on Facebook, Noise Pollution Podcast. So go check Blake out. Let him know I sent you and check out his stuff. It's all great content. And Blake's a great guy. We served together in the Army. And so, check it out. Let me know what you think. Tell him Brandon sent you. All right, that does it for the Swapcast stuff. If you guys missed out, if you didn't hear about it, there was a giveaway, last week. I gave away 3 codes for free downloads for Gunny Christian Bustler's book, No Tougher Duty, No Greater Honor, a memoir of a mortuary affairs Marine. So that happened last week. There's going to be a couple more giveaways coming up. So guys, keep your eyes and ears open if you want the chance to win some cool stuff. And you guys can hear all about that on the social media pages for the Badass American Heroes podcast. Boom. Without any further ado, let's get into this week's 2-part series with just a really great guy, David Misiura, an Air Force reservist and the president and CEO of Lox Hair Wax Company. Here we go. Let's do it. guys, here we are. We're back, the Badass American Heroes podcast with our interview today. I've got a very, very special guest. He is a Air Force veteran. He's still in the Air Force Reserve. He's a entrepreneur. He's a CEO and founder of a big-time company. Let's talk about him. I've got David Misiura with me. He is a Air Force reservist. He is a president CEO of Lox Hair Wax Grooming Company. He's got hair products for men and all kinds of awesome stuff for guys. So we're going to jump in. Let's talk to him. David, how's it going, brother?
Hey, Brandon. Thanks for having me. Thanks for that great introduction. Appreciate that.
Hey, man, I'm so happy to have you on. I am a huge fan of your guys' products. I buy them all the time. I give you guys way more money than I probably should. But I love your guys' stuff, man. You guys are always putting out awesome stuff. And I think you guys do it on purpose because every time I place an order, you guys drop another cool product that I have to have. And so, it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, the marketing team the marketing team, that's designed where we do that. For example, the Summer Raid, which is our seasonal pomade, that's it's actually on its way out. Actually, we're down to 9 left as of yesterday. And then once those are sold out, those will be gone until spring. But then we'll have our other seasonal pomade that'll be coming back in, and that is Wild Hunt. That is a peppermint pine hair and beard pomade. And likewise, that's also seasonal. So kind of have that going where we kind of, people have something to look forward to. And then, they only have a certain window, a few months or whatever, where they can get their hands on it and stock up. And that seems to be working. As far as extra products, we're always working on something new. Expansion is, that's really key in men's grooming. As you know, I mean, walk into your bathroom and there's probably have there's so many things that entail for men's grooming. And so we're trying to cover all of it, and eventually we will. But there's a lot out there, so we want to make sure when we do release a new product that it's quality. So we put a lot of research and development into everything before it's released. And so sometimes, we've been working on a product for maybe a year or more before it's actually released. And in some cases that's true, and in other cases it doesn't take as long to research and develop. But so we just want to make sure that it's top notch before we drop it to you guys, and for that reason, that's kind of what sets us apart from other grooming products as well.
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly believe it's the best stuff out there. But let's get into it, because before you were making pomades and running this super successful company, man, you were a kid growing up somewhere and living your life that way. So let's go back to the beginning and talk to us a little bit about where you grew up and what your life was like growing up.
Sure. Yeah. Let's see. Well, I was born in Indianapolis, Indiana. Not many people know that. Even people where I live now are surprised to know that. And it's kind of funny that football season is coming up, and so they're like, "Oh, are you an Eagles fan or a Pittsburgh Steelers fan?" Because I live in Pennsylvania, and I'm like, "No, actually, I'm a Colts fan." And they're like, "Where did that come from?" And so it's kind of funny. So I was born in Indiana, so I'm a Hoosier, which is what people are called when they're born in Indiana. The reason for that is my parents, my mother and my father. My father was going to Bible college out in Indianapolis at the time. He was married to my mother, and of course, they had me. I'm the oldest of 5, and shortly after that, my father finished his schooling there and moved back to Pennsylvania, which is where they're both originally from. And so, the rest of my siblings were born in Pennsylvania. And so I was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I was raised in Pennsylvania. So that's kind of like my my history there. Growing up was, I remember spending a couple of years living at my grandparents with my family. As my dad is blue collar American, just worked really hard for everything he's ever owned or had. And so, for that reason, a couple of years, I remember just living with my family, my siblings at my grandparents' house while my father earned enough and saved enough and put away enough to where they purchased their first home. And so then, I spent the rest of my life pretty much in that home. So, my father, right from the very beginning, taught me, values of hard work and great American things like that.
So, oldest of 5 kids, real blue collar, working for everything you got. Is that kind of what drove you growing up and eventually pushed you in the direction of starting your own company and joining the military?
Yeah. Yeah. So actually, my father is an Air Force veteran, and really, really smart guy. He was electronics. He worked on radar equipment for aircraft. And then after that, he actually worked for Steamtown National Park, which is a national park in Pennsylvania. So he's a federal employee after a federal employee in the military, became a federal employee for the Park Service, which is pretty cool. So I always grew up with every American grows up, or at least should grow up, patriotic and loving their country. But so I had a little bit more, influence to service, I guess you could say. And so when I was going through high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I did know that I wanted to serve. Didn't know which branch, didn't know which career I wanted. Of course, I grew up on Davy Crockett and, John Wayne. So I was always out fighting imaginary cowboys and Indians, or defending the Alamo from the Mexicans or whatever. And so, I grew up with the military mindset. And so, as every, I think, American boy at least goes through that stage at some point. My stage may have lasted a little bit longer than the average American kid, but, so anyway, yeah, whatever. I grew up, I got into paintball, the stick guns turned into cap guns, the cap guns turned into BB guns, and then paintball, and, this stuff and the other thing. And eventually I found myself graduating high school, not having a clue of what I wanted to do. Which I think, is relatable to a lot of kids when they graduate. But, so actually I went to Penn State University for, I say 2 semesters, but it's funny. They didn't complete either one. I guess that does speak for my character at the time. I really am I'm not really a quitter, but I really wasn't motivated because I think it's because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I had this I had this mentality where you graduate high school and the next thing you do is you go to college because that's just what you do, And so I had no clue what I was doing, what I wanted to do. I started off excited, as the school year always starts off exciting, and then you start getting into homework over your head, and then that easily fades. And so, needless to say, 2 semesters, and then just kind of I remember sitting in the cafeteria at Penn State, on a lunch break or whatever, just in between classes, eating my lunch. And I remember something came on the TV, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm ready to go join the military. So that's basically what, I guess my military passion was sparked when I was a young kid, watching, growing up with John Wayne and listening to my dad's Air Force stories and whatever. But, so that's when I finally kind of just made the decision. I was like, college life is not for me, and, I want to go serve my country. And so I did. I went down to the recruiter station, and believe it or not, I was actually, I actually looked into every branch except for the Marine Corps. I have mad respect for Marines, don't get me wrong, but I just knew that, let's put it this way. The Marines at the time, and I think it's still true now, they were offering no bonus. And, we can get into the debate on why do you really want to serve, is because of the bonus and this, that, other thing, whatever. But, every branch was offering a sign-on bonus at the time, other than the Marines. So I was like, if I'm going to join, hey, I like some money in my bank. At the time I was broke too. So, that kind of had a deciding factor on which branch. So I looked at the Navy, listened to the Navy recruiter, Didn't want to do, be on a ship for 6 months at a time. So that was easily ruled out. So the Navy was ruled out, but the Army was my first choice. As far as like desire goes, like I really just wanted to join the Army because I wanted to be a grunt. I very low aspirations, but it's true. I just wanted to be a grunt. I just wanted to carry a rifle or, do something combat related. At the time, one of my buddies was in the Army. He was actually in the Army Guard, and he was a mortarman. And he was like, he was getting ready to get deployed, and he said, he kind of tried talking.
What year was this when you were doing this?
This was, I graduated in 2004, and so this was, let's see, it's 2018 now, and I've been in the Air Force Reserve for 12 years, so 2006 was when I joined the Air Reserve, but this was around the same time that I was looking into the Army and Navy. So 2006, 2001, of course, the towers had already happened. That happened. I was in high school at the time. And so, yeah, that was huge. That had a huge impact on my life as well as the next American. I mean, highly motivated after that to serve. So, however, 2006, here I am. I'm in the Army recruiter station after listening to my buddy, kind of motivate me to join his unit so we can go overseas together, as buddies and fight the war on terror. And that was my motivation. I was looking forward to it. I was like, this is great. I get to go deploy, see combat, and I'm with one of my buddies. Like, this is cool.
That's kind of the childhood dream. It's kind of the childhood dream. Like, I want to go with my buddies and I want to go fight the bad guys and kill the bad guys and blow stuff up and shoot bad people and then come back and party, right? It's the dream.
Right, yeah. And sure. And I was like, I was like 19, 20 at the time, like every other 19, 20-year-old kid, after, just, that's all we think about, you just want to go to combat, because you're a young kid and you got all this testosterone and you just grew up watching war movies. And so that's, you glorify it. And so that's what you want to do. And so I wasn't any different. So that's, that's kind of what I wanted to do. So long story short with the recruiters, I ended up, signing the paperwork. We went to MEPS and, something essential happened at MEPS. So I knew this, but my recruiter knew this. But I'm colorblind. And so, and it's not just red, green. It's like the whole spectrum. Like it's pretty terrible. And, every time I, try and match clothes, I have to run it by my wife before I leave the house. But, it's pretty bad. So, but I knew this. And when I talked to the recruiter, he's like, he went down the checklist, this, that, are you this, are you that, are you this, are you that? And we got to the question, are you colorblind? I'm like, yeah, I'm colorblind. He's like, how bad is it? I'm like, it's pretty bad. He's like, yeah, he's like, what color is this pencil? And I'm like, oh, pencil, it's yellow or whatever, He's like, oh yeah, you're not colorblind. So he kind of just like overlooked that because he didn't want me to be colorblind. He wanted me to sign on so it looked good on his numbers. And so long story short, of course you can't hide anything at MEPS. And so that came out that I was colorblind. And so when it came time to sign my job, my recruiter comes in and he's like, he comes in and he's like, oh yeah, I got the job you wanted. You're going to be dropping warheads on foreheads, blah, blah, this, that, and the other. I was like, yeah, show me where to sign. So like, and he's like, oh, and I got you a bonus and like all this stuff, right? And so me, 19-year-old me, I'm like, yeah, tell me where to sign. This is cool. Let's do this. So I signed the paper. I don't even look at it. Like, I'm just a dummy. I don't even look at it. I sign where he tells me to sign. I go home and, I'm waiting for my date now to arrive so that I get shipped off to basic, And I remember, I don't know what sparked this, but I just I was going through my paperwork, which is something I rarely did, young kid, like who cares about paperwork, right? So I'm opening up this paperwork that I had received from MEPS, all my copies of everything, and I'm flipping through it. And I get down to the job selection where, it tells me the description of the job that I just signed my life away for. And it says clerk typist. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? What is clerk typist? And I'm reading the description, and it's like, basically I'm a secretary. And I'm like, what in the world is this? And then I go down even further. I'm looking at the GI Bill kicker, 0. Bonus, enlistment bonus, 0. Like GI Bill, 0. And I'm like, wait a minute. Am I at the wrong paper? And, so like I'm going through this. Nope, my name's on it. My social's on it. Like, So I called my recruiter up right away, and I'm like, dude, I got the wrong paperwork. Like, what's going on? And this guy, what a schmuck. I'm telling you. I mean, he knew all along, of course, and he was like kind of like basically told me, oh yeah, well, I couldn't get you because you're colorblind and this, that, and everything. I'm like, I told you, and so he didn't want to hear. He didn't care because like I was already signed in, and he tried convincing me that that like, oh, it's too late, there's nothing you can do, you're gonna kind of have to just go in as clerk typist and then maybe transfer once you get in or something like that. So I'm like, this isn't right. So I hang up the phone with him, and I tell my father. My father and I have a great relationship, and so I'm like, and to me, my father is like one of the wisest, he's the wisest man I know. So I go to my dad. I'm like, yo, Pop, I'm like, look at this, this isn't right. And so he gets furious. The recruiter pulled one over on me, and he's furious. And mind you, the whole time that I've been talking to all these recruiters, he's been in my ear saying, Air Force, Air Force, Air Force, and of course, because he's prior service Air Force. Yeah. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do Air Force. I'm like, Air Force is like, Air Force is for sissies and like pilots, and I can't fly the plane because like I'm colorblind, and I don't want to be a pencil pusher in the Air Force. Like, nothing happens in the Air Force. I'm like, I don't want to do the Air Force. So, being naive, of course, at this stage of my point, being 19, I didn't know that there were obviously a lot of great things that the Air Force did, but I didn't see that at the time. So anyway, long story short, my father takes me, and we go right down to one of our congressmen. We call him up, set up an appointment. We go right down into his office, and we sit down in front of him, and we explain to him basically what happened. And the congressman pulls out this paper and, signs it and folds it up 3 times, puts it in an envelope, seals it, hands it to me, and he says, take this down to the recruiting station. And I'm like, okay. So, I didn't know what it was. I don't know what it said. And I took it down there to the recruiting station, and about a week later, I think I had maybe not even from what I can remember now, I got a phone call saying that like I had to go down to the recruiting station and sign some paperwork because they were releasing me from the United States Army. And so that I tell everybody that's kind of like my funny story. Hey, I was in the Army for about 3 weeks. So
yeah, hey, thanks for your service in the Army.
Yeah, a lot of sacrifice, I'll tell you. So it was kind of funny though. It really was rewarding emotionally anyway, because when I went down there to sign that final release paperwork, I went in there. I saw my recruiter, and he avoided me at all costs. Like he wouldn't even look at me. It was pretty great. And after about 5 minutes of standing there at the desk, signing some paperwork that this orderly room, personnel person was giving me to sign and stuff like that, about out of the door, like I swear the door got kicked open somehow. I don't know. There's a grand entrance. The door swings open, and in walks like 5 full bird colonels and like a bunch of lieutenant colonels. And they grab the recruiter, like, not physically, but they're like, they point to him or something like that, and they all disappear in the back room. They shut the door behind them, and all I hear is like 5 voices yelling at this dude. And so I was pretty, kind of chuckling to myself, and I was kind of like, yeah. So anyway, shortly after that, I went right over to the Air Force recruiter, and I was like, well, process of elimination, I guess I'm joining the Air Force. And 12 years later, here I am.
So the Army doesn't work out. You go Air Force. Are you immediately thinking I'm going to go Air Force Reserve, or are you thinking, I'll go active duty and just do it full time? Like, where's your mind at with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. My dad was pushing me, of course, to go active duty. In hindsight, I probably could have. I don't regret not going, but I don't, wish I did at the same time either. But I think the deciding factor to me was that I just kind of got into some work, and so I was making a little bit of money, and so I had a steady girlfriend at the time, the whole girlfriend story. So I don't want to leave my girlfriend, whatever, which ended up not working out anyway. But of course, so at 19 years old, you can only see that, what's right in front of you. You're never thinking like long term. So at any rate, the deciding factor was that I kind of was comfortable where I was, and I wanted to do, I wanted to be a weekend warrior, as we're called. So that was my deciding factor. And also I figured too, I said, you know what, if I go reserve and I want to go active, it's easier to do that than it is to go active and say, oh, I kind of don't want this, and it's too late then, so I figured, you know what, I'll go reserve. If I'm in love with it and just chomped at the bit to do this full time, then of course I'll opt with that. But so anyway, I chose Air Force Reserve. I went down to MEPS again with the Air Force recruiter this time. He was straight with me, and because the thing with the Air Force recruiters is they don't care whether or not you join, because they have the numbers they meet the quota every month. So he wasn't BSing me. He was just straight with me. He wasn't telling me lies to get me to join. He just, hey, look, here's the facts. If you want to join, we'd love to have you. And if you don't want to join, there's the door. It's no big deal, whatever. So he was straight with me, which I appreciated, of course. So of course I told him I was colorblind, which at MEPS did the whole MEPS thing again. And, I went from having, I don't remember my score. I just remember my ASVAB score was really high. It was pretty good. So I went from having a job list to choose from that was 5 pages long. I literally saw that go down to 1 page because of my colorblindness. So I was kind of a little upset about that, but it is what it is. I ended up choosing air transportation, 2T2 port dogs, for any of you port dogs out there that are listening or whatever. I really enjoyed that. That's because, it's hands-on stuff. There were a lot of, desk jobs to choose from, financing, services, and stuff like that. There was quite a few medical field too, which is great. The Air Force, I will give them that. The Air Force they have a really great medical program if you're interested in doing that with your career after you get out of the Air Force. They train really well in that field. But I had no desire to be medical anyway, so I chose air transportation. It was one of the only jobs I was qualified for because of my colorblindness that I could do, that I wasn't stuck at a desk. So of course I chose that. And so I've done air transportation my entire 12-year career, 12 years in counting, and it's been pretty cool. It's been pretty fun.
Well, that's really good that it worked out, and you're doing something that you enjoy. So after you decide, okay, go in reserve, you get your job picked out. What's the process like from the time that you go to basic training, you graduate, and then you come back? What's that process like coming back? You've got a day job, you've got a steady girlfriend, and now you've got the Air Force. How's that all work and combine for you?
So going back about a decade now or more. So I'm thinking it was fun. I went through basic military training, BMT. At the time, it was only 6 weeks long. My tech school was following that. Actually, I graduated in, I think, November. So upon graduation, I was actually able to go home for Christmas leave, which was pretty cool. So my tech school immediately followed Christmas leave. So it was pretty cool. I got to go home for Christmas, graduated, and the new airman. So I got a lot of attention. It was a lot of fun catching up with friends and family, and was home for the holidays that first Christmas after I got in. So then right after that was over, I went back for technical training, tech school, And so this whole time, of course, I'm getting a steady paycheck, so I got money in the bank, and I get back from tech training, from tech school, and I get to my new unit, and I'm in processing. And, the Air Reserve, the National Guard, active duty, they're all pretty much the same for the first, the initial, let's put it this way, the Guard Reserve, they go to the same basic training that the active duty guys do. The Guard and Reserve, they go to the same tech schools that the active duty guys do. So for my first year, of in processing and training and all that stuff, I was pretty much on active duty status. We'll call it that. So, I was kind of living the active duty life, which was pretty cool, and I enjoyed it. Not so much that I was wanting to do it full time, because for the first year it flew by, and I learned a lot, and I was getting, learning customs and traditions and all this stuff, and it was great, and just really enjoying serving. But so after that initial year wore off, or as it was coming down to a close, let's see. Yeah, right. So as I'm in processing into my new unit, my new squadron, getting to know everybody, it wasn't soon after that we were put in the bucket for a deployment. And so, being as young as I was and being ready to go, and which is why I joined anyway, I was all excited, and I volunteered to go to the first deployment, which is kind of strange in the Reserve Air Force, which is completely different than the Army National Guard. So when the Army National Guard deploys, they'll send the whole unit. You deploy as a unit, and in the Air Reserve or Air Guard, it's completely different. What they'll do is they'll say, we need 30 bodies from the 88th Aerial Port Squadron, and we need 30 bodies from the 76th Aerial Port Squadron. We need 10 bodies from this squadron and 15 bodies from this squadron, and they'll kind of pick and choose, they'll pull from different squadrons as the need requires, and they'll send that group to deploy. And so it's kind of funny, kind of unique, kind of strange, but basically, you're not depleting the whole squadron just to go on a deployment. So you're picking from a hat, kind of, and you're sent with other members from other squadrons, and you make this expeditionary force, we call it. And so that's pretty cool. You get to meet, obviously, completely new people from all around the United States, and then you go into, in this case, it was a combat zone. It's not always a combat zone, but in this case, it was we went to Balad Air Base, which, if you've been there, anyone who's listening, its nickname is Mortaritaville. My first deployment, we got hit with rockets and mortars, indirect, direct fire, at least once a day, and probably more than that. But it was pretty shocking, and I will say this, it was a great experience. It was just a great experience, as sobering as it was. It was just, I still had that excitement as hey, wow, I'm in the desert right now, and this is crazy. Outside the wire, there's actual terrorists, and I have a bunch of Army buddies and Marine buddies, and they always bust my chops for not leaving the wire, and I try and give it back to them as much as I can. But I'll tell you what, though, I had some pretty, I'll call them cool experiences, but we had some pretty cool experiences.
So what year was that deployment to Balad in?
That was 2000. I think it was 07 to 08 was my first deployment.
I was at Balad in 2009. Actually, we were in FOB Normandy, but Balad was kind of our main resupply point, so we were there all the time.
Get out of here. Yeah. Okay. All right. So you know exactly then. At 09, it was still a hot zone.
Yeah, it was a super fun place. I'll tell you this, though. Balad, compared to FOB Normandy, they had 3 chow halls there. All the Air Force girls that were there, they had Burger King and stuff. It was heaven to me.
Oh, dude, don't get me wrong. Balad Air Base was nice. It was nice, dude. I am not saying I'm not saying I roughed it out at all there. Balad Air Base, I don't know if you know this or not, but that was Saddam Hussein's favorite air base. Like that was his, like, that was his favorite spot to go to. But anyway, yeah, so like it was massive, and yeah, I mean, anything you could think of was there.
Yeah, it was really cool.
So yeah, yeah, definitely. We had a lot of, it was like an R&R. Yeah, I don't know if I'd call it an R&R base, but we had a lot of people come in, like that were local. I'll use the term local loosely, but like kind of like maybe some Army Marine troops that didn't have enough leave per se to go all the way back to the States or even back to Germany or whatever for R&R, but they would, sometimes their commanders would let them go to Balad Air Base for a couple of days just to get away from the front lines or whatever. Although I don't see why they would do that, because like I said, we were getting alarm reds like all the time on a weekly basis. So like, it really wasn't that much, like, it wasn't like you came back to relax and sleep, but then you're kind of like your sleep is interrupted by the klaxon going off. But I mean, anyway, yeah, like, so it wasn't bad. It was a relatively safe place. And, that definitely was part of the great experience that I had in that time. Also, the hospital was there. So any and every soldier that got wounded, friendly and enemy, actually came through Balad. Yeah, that was pretty crazy. The choppers were landing on the helo pad on the hospital all the time, bringing wounded in. And then from there, of course, they would go to Landstuhl, Germany. And then from Landstuhl, they would go to Walter Reed. So, so it was a huge hub. Lots of passengers came through, material, cargo, everything. And working air transportation, I got to see a lot of cool stuff. I mean, all the Humvees that got replaced by MRAPs pretty much, came through our flight line. And so, I mean, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of MRAPs. We got to drive all. It was pretty, so like we have specs that, we have policies and regs. We're moving vehicles that, they can't have certain fuel past a certain point. So like if they did, we'd have to go, hey, got to go for a joy ride, because, I don't want to drain this thing. It's just more fun to like burn the fuel by just driving it around, So we took some MRAPs for some spins. It was pretty cool. All the new equipment that was coming through us. It was just a lot of fun, a lot of great experience. And then just on that same note, I actually ended up going back there a year later. And I think it was like late 2009, and it was completely different. It was like, I failed to mention this. So my first deployment to Balad Air Base, we had an F-16 fighter squadron there, which is awesome. But they would fly every 45 minutes. I'm telling you, on like clockwork, every 45 minutes, 2 would take off and 2 would come back. So we had 2 birds in the sky at all times. 2 F-16s were in the sky, patrolling, doing, ground air support, whatever their mission was. We had at least two at all times, 24/7 in the sky, which is pretty awesome. And so every 45 minutes, 2 would take off and the 2 would return. But if you notice, and I work the flight line, so I get to see this all the time. But if you looked at the 2 F-16s that took off, under their wings were like every missile you can imagine. They had, they had every kind of weapon on them that they possibly could fit when they took off. 45 minutes later, when they landed, they came back completely empty. And so that was really cool to see and just kind of know that they were out there, just giving the bad guys a really bad day. And so that was cool. But I only say that because when I went back there a year and a half later, it was completely different. Like I think I went like 2 weeks. It was like 10 days to 2 weeks before we got hit even once. Like it was night and day. Like the Air Force and the ground forces really like cleaned up that area. They just pummeled it, and they really, really did a fantastic job with combating the ISIS presence in that area, or Al Qaeda and whatever other affiliate there was. But yeah, it was just phenomenal, the difference.
Yeah, that's about the time that I was there, and it was a different war than what people told me it was before. That was my first and only deployment, but yeah, it was pretty slow and pretty quiet. But hey, that's the way we like it. We went in there and we kicked ass and we did our job.
Yeah, that's something you can see. Like, you know how you get some army troops or whatever, they deploy for a year and it's hard combat and they don't see any difference. So I was able to see the actual work that those guys did, people like yourself and the ground forces that were actually doing stuff. I got to, that was rewarding for me. And if any of your listeners are listening that were actually there during, whatever initial surge or even in any kind of fighting, like, we saw that difference. Like, me and my buddies and the people that I deployed with, like, you guys made a difference and people recognized that. Like, it was awesome. It was truly awesome. It just made me so proud to be part of, the United States military, and it didn't even matter what branch it was at that point. It was just like, man, we are, you hear this all the time, the branches getting busting each other's chops, but really we're, it's just so honoring and humbling to just be a part of the whole, American fighting force. I'll just say that. And it's truly, truly an honor. It's awesome.
Yeah. So you come back from Iraq in, 2008. What's your life like as a reservist coming back? You probably out-process a little bit, do a little bit of that kind of stuff, but then you go back to your regular job. Was that stressful for you? Was it tough?
Actually, funny story. Before I left, I still say, well, now that I'm doing the Lox, I can't truthfully say this, but before I started Lox or whatever, I was doing my most favorite job that I've ever had, and that was I was staining and painting outdoor decks and houses in the summer with my buddies around a development that was situated around this enormous lake, Lake Wallenpaupack, for all the locals out there who know what I'm talking about. But so that was like, I literally all summer long got to hang out with my friends and spend all day outside, and I got paid cash for it under the table. So, and I'm like, that was like, I left that to go, and I was doing the reserve thing, 1 weekend a month going down to McGuire Air Force Base, doing drill and this, that, and other thing, and up until my first deployment. And so, that's kind of what I was doing. And I was, whatever. I was, making a little bit of money, saving it a little bit here and there. And I honestly didn't have a set direction of what I wanted to do with my life. And, funny fact, the same friend at the time that I had that influenced me and persuaded me to attempt to join the Army and go deploy with him was the same friend at the time who then persuaded me to go down to the civil service test and take the testing area and take the civil service test for to become a corrections officer. And I'm like, yeah, what is that? I'm like, what? He's like, dude, he's like, and he was doing it at the time. And he told me, I remember him telling me, like, yeah, you're a prison guard, but like, he's like, dude, it's so easy. Like, you just like, you could tell, whatever. He's like, it's so easy. You're babysitting grown-ups. This is how he described it. And the pay and the benefits were like amazing, especially for our cost of living where I live. And so I was like, you know what, that's, all right, I guess why not? I went down and took the test, and sent my results. You can opt to choose to where you want to send your results. So I sent it to like a handful of prisons that were in the area. And surprisingly, until you actually apply to do prison work, you don't realize how many prisons are actually in your area. And it was kind of funny. There were like 2 or 3 county prisons, like within, an hour of me where I lived. There was a federal prison. There was a state, there were two state prisons within the kind of local proximity. And then there was even a couple more that were just a little bit further out of a drive. But like, I was like, oh, wow. So anyway, long story short, I took the civil service test to be a corrections officer. And I was told that veterans preference was good. So I got on a separate list altogether, a preferred list, which is cool. But I was also told that, it takes up to about 6 months for them to even set up an appointment for an interview or whatever. So in the meantime, I just continued to work as what I was doing. But almost immediately following that was when my first deployment was. And so, getting back to your question now, what it was like when I returned, at the time of my first deployment, and this is dating myself, I know, but like for all you guys that have been in the military for a while, or actually have been out for a while, you may be able to relate. On my first deployment, we had what were called morale calls. And so, it wasn't like it is today where, I got friends that like go to basic training now, and they're bringing their cell phones and they're on their Facebook and their social media, and they're posting like their status change. And I'm like, wait a minute, isn't this dude in basic training like now?
Totally different.
What's he doing?
Totally
like,
different times.
Taking pictures of his lunch, and I'm like, what in the world what is happening? So when I went in, when I was your age, but like when I went in, like I had like one of those phones that was like a flip phone, I think I still had or something. It was like something ridiculous. But anyway, and it was taken from me. I didn't even see it until like I graduated, and I was like, I forgot how to use the thing. No. So anyway, so when I was deployed, we had what was called morale calls, and we had 2 15-minute morale calls a week, which we were allowed. And so it made communication back home very unique. I'll use that word. So it was kind of like I wrote a lot of handwritten letters home, and I received a lot of mail. Like the mail call was actually a real thing. Like it was, like now mail calls like, yeah, whatever. You got email and messenger and all kinds of Skype and everything like that, which I experienced in my second deployment, which is again attributed to the whole night and day difference. Not only was the combat, the quote unquote combat, I'll call it, because like I never engaged in combat, but I was on the receiving end of all that. But not only was that different on my second deployment, but like the technology was different. Like we actually had Wi-Fi. Granted, it was slow, but we had Wi-Fi at my second deployment, so I was able to actually Skype home. The whole lagging conversation, which is kind of funny, like you get and the delay and all that. But what I'm saying is I didn't have that in my first deployment. It was nothing. We had no Wi-Fi. We had, it was a landline that you got. You signed up for it, and you were allowed 2 of them, 15 minutes each, a week. And then once you use those 2 15-minute phone calls up, like you were not permitted another one until the new week was up. And that was just to keep it fair, because they only had, they wanted to make sure everybody had a chance to, reach out and get back home with, phone calls and whatnot. But anyway, I'm spending way too much time explaining what a morale call is, but I feel like I have to, because like nobody even could probably imagine what it's like to not have a cell phone or whatever. But so anyway, it was during one of those morale call homes that I was on the phone, and there's that whole 10-second delay too, and someone picks up the phone, and they're like, hello, and I'm like, oh, hey, what's going on? And it's like, and then you wait like 10 seconds later, and like, hello, and I'm like, oh, and it's like you're stepping on each other, and it makes the whole 15-minute morale call like really not even that, great in itself. But at any rate, we figured it out. We managed, and it was during one of those phone calls that my dad told me that the prison called, and they're like, oh. He's like, oh, the prison called, and they want to set up an interview. I told them that you were deployed and this, that, and the other thing, and they said that wasn't a problem. They would wait until I got back. They would hold my interview spot, and so that was kind of good news for me. So I knew that when I got home, I had a new job kind of lined up for me, pending that the interview went well and all that stuff. So all that, to answer your question, when I got back from my first deployment, I pretty much got right back into civil service, or started my civil service career, went from military service to civil service, and that was being a corrections officer. And I did that for 10 years. I did that until, I did that for 10 years, up until I was able to, get Lox Hair Wax Company where it needed to be to support me. And that was, that was a wonderful, wonderful point in my life where I could do that and just leave the prison and get out.
So you're working as a corrections officer now after you come back from your deployment in 2008. You're still in the reserves. So you're doing your drill once a month, and then you got like 2 weeks of training over the summer every year?
Something
correct,
like that.
Yep. So you're doing that. At what point during this time do you start to get the vision for Lox? Is it, before your second
Yeah.
deployment? Is it after that?
Yeah. So, well, real quick, just my military career, quote unquote, other than my typical reserve obligations, which you just explained, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks out of the year. I went on 3 deployments, and that was within the first 4 years of my career. So the first 4 years, yeah, it was pretty much back to back. I got back from my first one, and it was literally just a handful of months later, maybe a couple, 2 to 3 months later, that we were put back in the bucket. And when I heard it was back to the same place, I volunteered again, and so like I said, what they need like a certain number of people per squadron, and what they do is they ask for volunteers first, and if that number fills up with volunteers, then good, and if it doesn't, then they start telling people, okay, we still need like 9 positions left. You're going, this, that, and the other thing. But anyway, I volunteered again with the prodding of one of my really good friends to this day, Tom Brown. He's actually a Philly cop on his civilian side, and he's still in the Air Force with me. But he hadn't gone yet, and he's like, yo, go back with me. Like, I want to go. I haven't gone yet, and so I was like, of course, yeah, I'll go. So yeah, he and I went. That was my second deployment, and then shortly after that deployment.
So let's back up a little bit then, and let's talk about your second deployment. As this is going on, you had mentioned that you had like this girlfriend that you had when you joined the Air Force. Is that still a thing, or at this point, like, are you single now?
No.
Are you married? Where are you at in your life leading up to this second deployment?
Yeah. So I was single again. That relationship didn't last. I think that relationship ended before I even left for my first deployment. And so when I came back home, I mean, I didn't have anything serious. I'll just say that I didn't have any. There were no serious relationships going on as far as like long term goes, and so I was single for all of those deployments. As in not married. Yeah. I mean, I was dating. The dating scene for me was kind of just like, I wasn't taking relationships seriously. I'll say that. I was still young. I was still immature, as far as relationships go. And so, yeah.
You think it made it easier to do these deployments and the kind of military
absolutely.
Life?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how, you hear special forces get this all the time, like, oh, if you want to do spec ops, like, you can't, this is not for the married life. And I don't know how they do it. And that's why the divorce rate is so high, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, some of them do it though. And some of them have successful relationships, and that goes, I mean, this is a whole other topic, but I mean, like, military spouses, military families, they're phenomenal. I mean, they sacrifice a lot, and people don't, people take that for granted. People don't understand how much that military spouses and families actually go through when their, significant other or their mother or their father deploy. And so, they don't get the credit they deserve at times.
When you hear about a military spouse, you're usually hearing about the bad ones, and the good ones don't
Sure.
get the highlights that they deserve. Yeah, you're absolutely right, man.
Yep, 100% agreed. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's hard, it's difficult. The easy thing is to be, the easy thing is to just, give up or be unfaithful or whatever. That's the easy thing. Lots of people do the easy thing. But yeah, it's very difficult, and they don't get the credit they deserve, and they really do. Actually, to the military's credit, there is a lot of support out there for families and spouses that their loved one is deployed, and to the credit of the military, that's pretty cool. There's programs that they can do and stuff like that. So, but yeah. So anyway, me personally, I was not married at the time, and that definitely made it easier to answer your question. Like, yeah, I mean, there's nothing tying me down here. Don't get me wrong, my immediate family's great. Like I said, I'm the oldest of 5 at the time, and my parents, of course, both married together, healthy, and so like I missed them. Absolutely, I missed them, and they were wonderful. My my mother sending me care packages all the time, and it was just great. I got a wonderful, awesome family. I'm very thankful for them. But yeah, so other than that, though, there was nothing really, there was no significant other that was kind of distracting me or holding me back from going.
Yeah. So you're still, you're single, you're going into your second deployment. You guys get the opportunity to deploy together and kind of go back to your old stomping grounds. That's got to be great,
Yeah.
man.
Dude, that was so cool. Like I said, it was Tom's first time there. But it was kind of like, it was my second time and I'm looking back now and I'm kind of laughing at myself. But like when I showed up, like when the plane landed there, I was just kind of like, I felt like this is going to sound so weird to people who've never been in our shoes, who have deployed before. But like when I landed back at Balad Air Base, I kind of felt like I was back home.
Yeah.
And it's so weird to say that. It's so weird to say that. But like, I mean, and I'll tell you this too. I mean, like, even when I got back from my first deployment, like I missed it. Like I was like, man, I feel like I feel like I'm in the wrong place. Like I'm here, I'm home. This is where I lived for like almost all my life. But like I feel like I don't belong here. Like this is weird. Like I didn't go back or somehow. And so honestly, like when that deployment came up, I was really more than happy to like go again. And so anyway.
And so what year is this in when you're deploying the second time? This is probably like early 2009-ish?
Yeah, and without looking at my DD-214, I would have to say, yeah, early 2009-ish. And I remember my first deployment was a split year because I went in like late fall, early winter, and I went over into the new year. And so that was like, I think it was 07, 08 was my first deployment. And then my second deployment, I think it may have been 08, 09.
Okay.
But again, I'd have to look at the records. But yeah, somewhere around in their time, yeah. Somewhere right around in there, yeah.
And so, like you said, you get back kind of home where it feels right. And, that's one thing with the reserves. I don't know how you guys do it, because coming back from a deployment, active duty, you get a couple days off, but then you guys all stay together. Reserves, you come back and everybody goes their separate ways. Dude, I don't know how you guys do that, man.
Dude, that is like, I mean, yeah, that's, again, we can go into whole different discussions and whatnot, and this is probably has to do a lot with psychology, that whatever. But like you just said, I mean, that's two completely different ball games here. You have active duty who deploy together and then come back together. You guys are like a family. You guys that's how you guys are designed to function. You guys are designed to function as a family. And just like any other family out there, you could have your dysfunctional families. You can have, you have the sibling who nobody likes. You have the sibling who picks on the other guys. Every unit has their issues. I get that. I totally get that. Every family has their quals. But so with the reserves, it's completely different though. Like we show up. I see these guys one weekend a month, and yeah, I mean, it's great. It's cool. We're having fun. Hey, how was your month? Hey, I haven't, hey, see you next month or whatever. We spend 2 days with each other, and then we go on our own separate ways. And we, and our lives are busy because we're civilians. Like, that's our full-time thing. So like when I was in corrections, I was like, my mindset was corrections. I wasn't thinking about my buddies. And then drill weekend come up and it's like, oh, hey, how you doing? And then you're back into the mindset of the civilian world. And so it's completely different. You spend 6 months with someone in a combat zone and, these bonds are made and these friendships are formed. And it doesn't even have to be a combat zone. You spend 6 months with anybody anywhere for 24/7, you're going to have a relationship with that person. You know what I mean? So like,
yeah, absolutely.
So it doesn't even matter if it's combat or not. Of course, the stresses of being in a quote unquote combat zone or something like that, of course that adds to it, and that could definitely exemplify or strengthen that, of course. But so yeah, it's completely different. So I come back home from a deployment and I'm missing these guys. Like I don't even see them. Like I live in Scranton, Pennsylvania. My buddy who's the Philly cop, he lives in Philly, and like I made some really, really good friends who were from Texas. And I'm like, that's like a lifetime away in Texas.
Yeah.
Like, and so it's like, it was very, very difficult very difficult.
Yeah. But now, now you're back in Balad with your family. What's your second deployment like? Because we touched on it a little earlier. It's a totally different ball game in 2009 than it was in 2007 and early 2008.
Yeah, yeah, totally different. And I did touch on it earlier, and um, yeah, it was crazy. My again, going back to my first deployment, just for comparison purposes. I remember we landed on it was a C-17. The ramp dropped, and we're all walking out the back of the ramp, and I remember seeing two smoke columns. Like couldn't tell if they were on base or off base because, like I said, the base was huge. But I remember seeing two smoke columns. One was dark black, and one was kind of like a dusty color. And I remember thinking, I'm like, oh man, was this base just under attack? Oh my god, like I don't know what's going on. Like nobody's saying anything, And it turns out that they were the smoke pits were there, and which is a whole nother thing. And there's been investigations and unfortunately deaths related to this stuff, and the government is not doing as much as they should be doing at all when it comes to that. It's kind of related. A lot of people compare it to Agent Orange. But anyway, yeah. So like the smoke pits were going off there, and then I remember right after that, like kind of realizing like what was going on, get my bearings and whatnot. I remember going to the barracks, and at this time we were landed. We picked up our bags. This is within the first hour of landing at Balad Air Base. I'm standing outside the barracks with one of the guys that had been there. We were replacing him. And this is a really cool story. He's standing there, and he's in like his ABU bottoms and a brown T-shirt, and he's outside, and just like I don't even know if he shaved that day. Like just a picture of like the salty dog who's been there, this veteran who's been there, like he can't wait to go home. He really doesn't care about anything at all. I think he was like chewing tobacco. He's just outside standing there. He's kind of like he was like our sponsor, if you will. Like he was kind of showing us around, and he's standing there, and we're all of us. We're all green. We're wearing like our full kit that we got issued to us. We're wearing our hard hats, our IBA is on. We're carrying our C bag, our D bag, like every bag that we were issued to us. Like we're lugging the stuff around, and so we're looking as green as can be. And we're huddled around this guy. And we're just kind of listening to him, like he's telling us, like a chow hall locations here, gyms here. You hear the hours of this, that, transportation, this. We're kind of just listening to him, and this bang goes off. And I don't mean like a flash bang. It was like the earth shook, and it was like an explosion. And dude, I tell you what, man, like a couple of the guys, like dropped their bags and kind of. I don't remember anyone like jumping on the ground in like sheer terror, but like it was kind of like we were all taken back. What in the world just happened? Like this explosion went off and the ground just shook, and we're all like, short of peeing our pants. Like we don't even know what's going on. And this guy's just standing there, didn't even flinch. And he just kind of chuckled to himself, and he goes, that was a controlled detonation. And we're like, oh, what? What in the world is a controlled detonation? And so, and so I remember though, like mentally noting that, and I'm like this guy. I don't know who he is or whatever, but like, I just was blown away or impressed with the fact that like, how do you get to the point where I am, who's like completely lost, don't even know what's going on, scared out of my mind, and then this guy who just like doesn't even care, whatever. And to my surprise, to my surprise, I'll just say that it took like maybe a month, and like that's where I was mentally, after so many klaxons going off and after so many controlled deaths going off and whatever, like you learn to just, I remember in the middle of the night, well, I work night shift, but like sleeping in the day, and like the klaxon would go off or an alarm light would go off or whatever, and you're rolling off your bed, under your bed, you're trying to barricade yourself from whatever, the wall collapsing. And, you take your there's certain procedures that you do, or you're supposed to go find shelter. You're supposed to go find hard shelter or whatever, And so for the first 30 days, you're doing all this stuff by the book, and you're like, kind of, whatever. But and then after that, you just start sleeping through it, you don't even, you don't even care anymore, and so I'm sure you can relate. It's just kind of like, yeah, wow.
Okay, we're gonna do this again.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that was definitely Iraq in 2007. It was still pretty hot and things were popping off.
Yeah, for sure. And then of course, and that's just my little experience. I'm no way saying like how I'm not even like saying I'm a Billy Badass or anything. That's just my little experience. And, everyone's experience is different. It could be greater, it could be lesser, and it doesn't matter. That was just my experience. But, so anyway, the only reason I got into that was to compare it to my second deployment. And that was like, I remember landing there and like, it was just quiet. It was like the F-16 squadron was still there, I think, but like they weren't doing their like typical 45 minutes, 2 birds out and 2 birds back. Like it was, it was just really quiet. We had an indirect fire attack, like I said, like a week and a half in, and like it was just really weird, kind of. That's the best way to describe it. It was just really weird, and because I remember just thinking like, man, I remember the last time I was here, it was not like this at all. And it was kind of cool in a way. It was more weird, but it was definitely kind of cool in a way because I knew why it was like that. I knew why it was quiet, and that's because, the air power in the area and the ground forces in the area just put work in. I mean, they just worked that area, and that was just a direct result of, American combat tactics of, all of you guys. I say you guys because that's not my job. My job's air transportation. My job is to get you guys what you need to do what you do. And so, like, all you ground pounders did your job, and that was a direct result of it. And it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool to, like we said, be able to look at that and be like, all right, yeah, we did our job. And the U.S., we all came together and we beat the bad guys. We beat them down.
Yeah.
And it was a totally different area than it had been a couple years ago. And so it's cool for me to hear the stories from you, who was there, a year and a half before I was, of like, oh, this is what it was like. And then, because I remember going to Balad, and it's like, okay, this is just a big base, but nothing's really going on.
Yes, exactly. So you experienced what I experienced on my second deployment, which was just like I said, it was just a nice big base. I mean, like, it was quote unquote, it was chill. Like it was cool. Yeah.
So what kind of work were you guys doing there when you're there on your second deployment? You're doing more air transportation stuff, but what's that look like on kind of day-to-day operations?
Yeah, dude, what a great question. And honestly, until you asked that, like, I completely forgot this. So the first deployment, right? And I'm going to go back to it because I'm comparing deployments to the same exact place, which in itself is just really cool. I mean, like, I don't know a whole lot of people that say they were deployed to a certain area, went home, and then went deployed back to the same area. So for me, that just adds to my experience, and like that's really cool, and I am grateful for that. But in saying that, like, I always have to go back to my first deployment to compare it to my second, and so this is just really cool. It's the same exact location. Like, I was just there, like, a year ago, and now here I am back at the same spot, and just all the comparisons and contrasts are just mind blowing. But anyway, so workload or day-to-day operations, as you say. So my first deployment, we worked 12-hour shifts. We worked the flight line. So port dogs, 2 T2s, air transportation. Basically, our jobs are logistics. And the best and easiest way I explain what we do is I basically say, we're UPS, but instead of trucks, we use C-17, C-5, C-130s, and all these aircrafts. And instead of, delivering, boxes that you order from Amazon or whatever, like, we deliver, big boxes. So, I mean, like, it could be anything, honestly. When we do food, we do mattresses. I remember shipping out like 1,000 mattresses, to a couple of different locations. Obviously, we're replacing old mattresses with new mattresses, and probably for guys somewhere out there on the front lines, I don't know, somewhere. But, I only use that as an example. Like, we will just ship anything. Obviously, the fun stuff include all your 1.1s, your 1.2s, and the bombs and the ammunition and the MRAPs and all the combat necessities, I'll call them. So that's the fun stuff. That's the fun part that we do. But yeah, so basically we do logistics. And so for 12 hours, our 12-hour shifts, we were split up. So it's 24/7 operation, just like almost all military careers. It's a 24/7 operation. Of course, you have operations that aren't 24/7. There's financing and stuff like that. Of course, they actually have hours where they're open and closed. But the aerial port, as you know, doesn't shut down. So we split it up into two shifts, two 12-hour shifts. I worked the night shift. I loved the night shift. Night shift was awesome, and that started at midnight. So I went in at midnight, and we got done at noonday. That was our shift. And I only say that because our first deployment, we were working 14, 16 hours sometimes. And it was, it was exhausting. Like, it was long. And of course, it's the desert, so it's hot. Of course, anyone who's ever been there just knows it's extremely hot. And even night shift really isn't like, it's not like it's nice. But, so we were working, 37 days was actually, we worked 37 days straight, before we got a quote unquote day off. And so that was pretty wild. Busy, very busy, lots of learning as you go. Remember my first deployment, I was only had about a year in the military. So I was technically I was, fresh out of tech school. So all this on-the-job training really took place on my first deployment. So I was learning a lot, and thankfully my mentors and the people that were there working with me were patient and understanding. And I was a quick learner. I'm not saying I'm stupid or anything like that. I'm definitely not slow, but so I was a quick learner, but I definitely, became a good help once, I was up to speed with a lot of things, and it didn't take long, especially because the workload was so long. Like, you're just constantly doing it. So if you don't get it right the first time, don't worry. In a few minutes, you're going to have another chance to do it right again.
That's the best way to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agreed. Absolutely. Yep. So anyway, that was the first deployment. My second deployment, I remember just kind of sitting around, and I'm not sitting around all day, but I remember sitting down actually, which didn't happen on my first deployment. We were lucky to get food on our first deployment. We've been out on this flight line, does someone want to run back? We would have someone run back and grab food for everybody, bring it out, and we would kind of eat as we go type of deal. Yeah. And not always, but a lot of times that's how it happened. Of course, like I said, not always. I'm not trying to paint this picture it was something that wasn't, but it was extremely busy, and it was hard to find time to do anything other than the mission at hand, which was logistics. And then, like I said, so the second deployment, I was caught myself just kind of just sitting down for, whatever it was, 15, 20 minutes, even if it was that, and I'm like, man, we're waiting for the next bird to come in, the next cargo plane's coming in. We got 20 minutes to kill before it gets there. And then it's hump time. But up until, you still have 20 minutes to kill. And I'm like, man, this never happened. So the workload was a lot less. But if you're still tracking with me, it didn't stay like that. So I don't know, this may help with the timeline of when I was there, but towards the end of my second deployment, it started to pick up again. And that's because we started the withdrawal from Iraq.
Yeah.
And we were sending everything and everyone back home, and everything and everyone in OIF came through Balad Air Base, and it was crazy again. So for my last, I don't know, last month I was there or more, maybe even 2 months I was there, like it was we were humping again, and like we were sending stuff back home, but it was the other direction. Like, so my first deployment, we were sending everything out. Everything was coming in brand new from the United States, and we were sending it out to forward operating bases and whatnot. And then on the end of my second deployment, everything was coming back broken, shot up and used, and we were sending it back to the States. So it's just such a unique experience to experience both aspects. I definitely was truly blessed to experience both of those.
Yeah, it's a really unique viewpoint, because that's when I was there, and we were going around and shutting down places and sending stuff back, and the fob we were at, we shut it down, and everything there that was salvageable that we weren't giving away for free to the Iraqis, we were loading up and doing convoys every week, taking it back to Balad so it could fly back out. So yeah, that's so funny, man.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Wow.
So, your workload picks up during the second deployment. You're sending stuff back. Iraq is winding down now at this point.
Yes, totally. Yep.
You guys come back home at the end of the deployment. Is it the same thing that you experienced after the first deployment, where you're kind of like, man, I miss Iraq. I miss the camaraderie, the brotherhood, the job, the work tempo, the mission. Did you kind of experience that same thing, or at this point where you're like, you know what, I'm all Iraqed out, I think I'm good now? All right. So that is a good place to cut this episode. Part 2 is going to be coming at you guys Wednesday morning. It'll be out there live for you guys to finish the awesome episode that I've got going with David and find out about the rest of his career in the Air Force and his career as a corrections officer, and how he came up with the idea and put in place this business plan to separate himself from corrections and be able to focus on a job that he was passionate about, that he loved, with Lox Hair Wax Company. So that's going to be in part 2 of the interview with David. That's going to be dropping Wednesday morning, so make sure you come back and check that out and listen to that. Man, what an awesome part 1, hearing about David's life growing up, and his struggles with getting into the service, being colorblind, and finding a job that was suited for him, and his incredible story about going to Balad and then going back and seeing the changes and how the U.S. was really making a difference in that area of Iraq. It's really, really cool, and it's a really great story about seeing the big picture kind of come together at the end of the war. So it's great to be able to hear that from David. Like I said, check out part 2 that's going to drop Wednesday and finish out the story and find out how David transitioned from the military into this other part of his life while continuing to be an Air Force reservist, and the struggles that come along with that. So make sure you tune in for that. Now we're going to jump into my favorite part of the show, the Badass American Hero of the Week. For those of you that don't know, the Badass American Hero of the Week, every week of the podcast, every episode that comes out, I go through and we talk about one recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor. So again, for those of you that don't know, the Congressional Medal of Honor is the highest award that can be awarded in the United States military for valor. It's there's only so many recipients of this. There's only so many living recipients, and we're going through and highlighting each recipient that's been awarded the Medal of Honor. We're going through in alphabetical order and reading their citation and talking a little bit about their lives. So tonight, our Badass American Hero of the Week is Christian Albert. He's a private from Company G, 47th Ohio Infantry in the United States Army, born in Cincinnati, Ohio. He was a infantryman during the Civil War, and this citation was awarded on 8/10/1895 for actions taken at Vicksburg, Mississippi on 22 May 1863. The citation's really short. It says, Private Christian Albert awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for gallantry in the charge of the volunteer storming party. So I can only imagine, having an enemy force charging down at you and gallantry in the face of that charge, standing up, fighting, those battles during the Civil War. God bless those guys that fought those wars, because it was hand to hand, brutal, just, stand up, shoot, and hope that you don't get hit. So, Private Christian Albert of Company G, 47th Ohio Infantry during the Civil War, you are my badass American hero of the week tonight. Folks, make sure you come back Wednesday for the conclusion with David from Lox Hair Wax Company. Make sure you check that out. This is going to be the first podcast that's also available in an audio only format on YouTube. So you can go watch this. It'll be, a background, and the audio will be on YouTube. So if you're a YouTube person, that's going to be available for you from now on. I'll include the link to the YouTube channel in the show notes. You can just go into YouTube, boom, hit Badass American Heroes podcast. It'll pop right up. You can find it and listen. There's going to be more stuff going on with the videos there as well in the future. Guys, if you're a vet and you're out there and you're having a tough time, this is more important now than it's ever been in the history of the military. If you are out there and you're struggling and you're having a tough time and you feel the walls coming in around you, and you've reached out, you haven't been able to get a hold of anybody, get the help that you think that you need, please reach out to us here at the podcast. My phone is on 24/7. Send me an email, send me a DM on Instagram or on Facebook, and let me get you connected with the help that you need. Whether the 22 number of veterans that kill themselves a day is accurate or not, I could really give two fucks. The fact that one veteran a day commits suicide is heartbreaking and is one too many. So regardless of what the number is, we as veterans, we need to come together, help our own, help each other out, be there for each other. It is our calling as veterans. There's nobody else out there that's going to watch out for us like we're going to watch out for each other. There's nobody else out there that's going to care for us like we care for each other. So let's come together, let's help each other out, and let's end this veteran suicide epidemic. Let's fucking crush it. And, let's find out how to live better, happier lives. So, again, if that's you, if you feel the walls closing in around you, and you feel hopeless and alone and lost, please reach out to a battle buddy. Reach out to somebody on social media. Reach out to me at the podcast and get plugged in to the help that you need so that you can get your life back on track and be happy. That's the key to beating PTSD is finding a way to be happy and finding a mission that makes you happy in life. So there's that. I take it seriously and I mean it when I say it. If you're ever there and you need it, reach out. Guys, you can find the podcast on all the podcatchers that are out there. Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. If you're listening to it now, you found it, but tell your buddies about it. The podcast is growing. We just hit over 1,000 downloads a week or two ago. We're now pushing 1,200. So this thing is really starting to take off. It's snowballing, and I have big dreams and big hopes for the podcast. And I can't do it without you guys that listen to it and support it. So tell your friends, tell your friends, share it online, on your Facebooks, on your Instagram, so that we can continue to grow and reach more people and get more awesome stories like David's tonight. You guys out there also, if you want to help the podcast out, if you enjoy what you're hearing, please, man, go on iTunes and leave a review. Those reviews help us climb up the charts. They help more people listen. They help us get noticed so that, we can take this thing and grow it even farther. So watch for a giveaway coming pretty soon. If you like free stuff and you are good at leaving an awesome review, I might have a contest for you coming up in a couple weeks. So keep an ear out for that. All right, I'm going to get out of here. Before I do, I'll tell you guys where you can reach me. Instagram, you can find the podcast on Instagram at Badass American Heroes Podcast. You can find it on Facebook. Just go in there, search Badass American Heroes Podcast. That pops right up. You can find it on YouTube now. If you go in and you search Badass American Heroes podcast, the video and audio will be up there. Hopefully, I'll have people here in the studio with me soon that we can do video podcasts with. Guys, you can find it on all the podcatchers out there. So tell your buddies, tell your friends, tell your family, tell them to listen to the show. Let's grow this thing up. 1,200 downloads is coming. I see it. I want to hit $2,000. Let's make it happen. Let's work together. Let's take care of each other. Let's be cool people. And guys, fuck ISIS. I'm out of here.